this point, it's pretty hard to argue that Garp isn't just the straight up strongest dude from the golden era of One Piece. Except for maybe like Rocks, but even he then just gets super anxious when Garp is around, so I'm pretty sure that he's an absolute nightmare. But then he's also like surprisingly complex, and I think he may simply be one of, if not the single best written characters in all of One Piece. From fights to ethics to morals, here's why I think that Garp is just next level compared to the rest, and why Luffy has some pretty freaking good genes. And first up, I think it's absolutely undeniable at this point that Garp himself is just built different. I think I really need to glaze him up a little bit here because, seriously, the God Valley flashback has made some pretty big waves for my man here. For better or worse, it seems, I guess. I mean, morally, I've kind of really started to question what Oda is doing with him here, which I'm gonna get into in just a moment, but when it comes to power, the entire final saga has had this fun little sub-goal of showing all of us just how much Oda straight up loves Garp. The man has always been a real menace to pirate society, chucking cannonballs like baseballs and swinging that titanic ball and chain of his around. Now, he literally is a Kuda burst in living form with his mighty punches. Mr. Big Fister here drops some galaxy impacts that can level islands in his old age still, but Prime Garp, the man that we've been hearing about in legends told by the current generation, is making everyone on God Valley look like total chumps, let's be honest here. And for pretty good reason. The more we see of him, the more we understand what type of monster he actually is. Let's look at what we're working with here, right? None of the big shot pirates seem to be particularly fazed by the Holy Knights around. I mean, we literally see Whitebeard and Rayleigh casually chopping them down in chapter 1161. I mean, we literally see Whitebeard and Rayleigh casually chopping them down in chapter 1161, but Garp? Nobody is happy that Garp is on this island, except for maybe Kaido. And that's just because he's a sick little freak who likes to fight people that are way out his league, and that rhymed for no reason. Now in chapter 1160, Roger and Rocks were both pretty nervous and pressed by Garp's arrival, and then in chapter 1161, we see exactly why. Big Mom tried to bust out a double homie special move on Garp we haven't seen her use before, and he just kind of shrugged it off and told her, sorry, this was way too weak. The woman who would go on to rule the seas as a Yonko, arguably the second or third strongest Rocks pirate on his crew, was completely ignored by Garp. Does that compute for you how crazy that is? Like, he is truly something else. Not to mention that her little buddy Kaido puts Garp in the same regard that he puts Roger and Rocks, which, I mean, by itself should just speak volumes for how truly insane Garp's true power has actually been. But somehow, if that isn't enough for you, look no further than who Garp forces to run away from him. Here we have the combined group of Big Mom, Whitebeard, and Kaido, 3 out of the 4 OG Yonko, admitted that they couldn't confidently deal with Garp as a group, so they all just turned tail and ran away to do something else. Now, I'm not saying that Garp 100% wins that interaction all the time, but I do think there is nobody, and I mean nobody in the modern era, who would have ever felt confident squaring off against all 3 of these Rocks powerhouses and, you know, make them run away. But you know, Garp did, and they all responded accordingly by, you know, looking for something better to do on the island. I mean, I'll be honest, after seeing the Holy Knights kind of get completely dismantled by the pirates in chapter 1161, I'm feeling pretty confident that Garp is just straight up the strongest member of the world government during the Golden Era, outside of probably Emu, yes, which makes a lot of sense when you actually consider the Holy Knights' powers. They have got immortality, yes, they cannot die. I mean, Scopper Gaban taught us that Conqueror's Haki is the key to overriding their invulnerability, but we also know that they don't just die after they get cut, right? Summers literally gets cut in half here and is able to scream and chat while he's waiting for his regeneration to work again. So the Holy Knights don't have to be powerful fighters compared to, say, Garp or Rocks here, because they can just always win the stamina battle and make it out somehow. Like, I'm not saying that they're a joke or anything, don't get me wrong here, but it's very clear, I think, that Oda has given them a really broken ability, regeneration, and immortality to then compensate for their lacking offensive abilities, at least when you compare them to the real big shot pirates on the islands. Actually, since we're on the topic of the Holy Knights here, this is actually the perfect place for me to pivot a little bit and talk about the actual big issues I'm kind of having with Garp in this flashback. You may know about this because I've touched on it in a couple of videos recently, yeah, like this one, but seeing the actual inhumanity occurring on God Valley, you know, with innocent children, women, and just innocent citizens being slaughtered here, what the hell is Garp doing? I mean, his son Dragon is not okay with what's going on here. He even punches a guy. So does Garp know what's actually happening here in God Valley? Or does he just think that the Celestial Dragons are on a little, like, field trip or something? And, like, why is he part of the Marines to begin with? Like, at this point in the story, I actually need a proper answer to this and not just, well, that's just how Oda wrote it, because I can just not accept he's fixing the system from within anymore, because he's really not. Even if he is the secret head of Sword during the modern day era, the stuff that Garp is not only defending, but actively enabling by fighting for the government seems to go against, like, everything. This entire Herald, Rocks, God Valley flashback, whatever you want to consider it at this point, has me really wondering what Garp's true ethics and morals actually are. Like, I'm very confident that somewhere in his heart, Garp, yes, is of course a good person. We've seen him do a lot of good things, and there's just too much hype around him, too much respect given to him, and genuinely, yes, I love the guy as a character, but to be fair, for the purpose of actually analyzing him in depth here, I do have to show you guys just how bad Garp can actually be. And that way then afterwards I can try to make sense of it maybe and figure out what's going on with the dude. And also let me make something crystal clear here. We do know that Garp is very conscious of the rotten behavior of the Celestial Dragons. In case you don't know, in chapter 957, Sengoku straight up says that one reason that Garp hates talking about God Valley is because Garp actively was protecting the Celestial Dragons. So he doesn't love them, yes, but he does seem to be totally fine with them being around on the sea level. I mean, his moral compass does draw a very strict line when it comes to assisting the Celestial Dragons, but apparently he's, like, more or less fine letting them do whatever they want. Back when chapter 1096 came out, by the way, there was some debate on whether or not Garp was conscious of what the Celestial Dragons were actually doing, but now I can pretty confidently say, I think, that that's just no longer holding true. We do see him chilling by the pool with some bikini babes, just casually talking about how the Celestial Dragons were on God Valley, how they stole Shaki, and how they had good security, which we now know includes his damn kid, by the way. And the only reason he actually went to stop anything on God Valley to begin with was due to Roger's involvement, which was the only way that he was even interested in this. And so this means that somewhere in his mind, it was all good for him to just send his son to an island to support some ethnic and racially driven, like, slaughter, basically. I don't know, and I guess he's just fine having his kid be its warden and defender, where the grand prize, by the way, of this event was a person that got kidnapped. And something that's actually been on my mind while the anime's been airing is the super hype section of Egghead Island, which is just how much the Vice Admirals seem to know about the inner workings of things way more than we ever thought. Like, the Admirals and the Vice Admirals, they're not just left in the dark, we're all good, everything's fun. These guys are allowed to see the Gorosei's transformations. They actively witness and contribute to the butchering that's going on here, and the only time they seem surprised is when the dark magic stuff is actually happening. But overall, the Vice Admirals definitely know way more about the inner workings of the government than I do think we all ever dared give them credit for. And honestly, I always feel like, and I don't know if you thought the same thing, but, like, I don't know, I kind of told myself, you know what, these poor Marines probably don't even know all that much about what the Celestial Dragons actually do unless they're, like, really high ranking, and then even the admirals, they know they're bad, but, you know, they don't know what they're doing in person. But no, like, it's pretty clear, I think, now more than ever, that all the Marines do enable the very rotten actions of the Celestial Dragons. In fact, when I went back and checked, I kind of completely forgot that that's literally something said word for word in chapter 957 when Sengoku is talking about Garp helping the Celestial Dragons. Because in this chapter, a Marine literally questions why Garp would have a problem doing that because a sailor's job should always be to protect the celestial dragons. There's some mad seedy propaganda apparently. Now, circling this back to Garp though, the dude might quite genuinely know even more than most other members of the Marines on top of everything, seeing that he's actively been sent to Marija to defend it during the last reverie. Remember that he was the one that Shirahoshi and Vivi seem to trust and want protection from. And yes, it does make sense, he hates the Navy's top brass and the Celestial Dragons apparently, yet somehow he's also able to convince himself that defending them is still better than, I don't know, joining the Revolutionary Army, his son? Why and how? Like, how can Garp genuinely live with himself at this point? Even like, we're not even talking about Ace's death yet. I guess to be fair here, even though I don't actually know if this makes things better or worse, Garp has always seemed to hate the world government leadership. I mean, in chapter 1158, we do see Rox and Harold actively talking about Garp and his worldviews. And according to Rox at least, he's always seemed to despise the top brass of the world government. And even worse, Garp canonically makes fun of bald people. He made fun of Harold for shaving his head, he made fun of Qinzhao, and that's just not cool. I will say this as a sworn defender of follically challenged people everywhere, it's not okay to make fun of bald people no matter how funny it is. Garp, I will say I expected better from you, but I really don't. Somehow you've become a defender of racism, sexism, and hairism, the most bad of them all. Now, that's what we do know about Garp's kind of wacky moral compass, I guess, but it's not all bad. I gotta say that too. In fact, Oda's kind of gone out of his way to make Garp seem like the GOAT. I mean, not only in terms of his insane power, which I'm not arguing with, very, true, but also he's supposed to be a really just stand-up guy. I guess from the point of view of some spineless Marines, I do get it. Garp is actively someone who defies and questions the world government and can do so without really having any super bad repercussions either. My guess is that the world government would rather have Garp hawk his mighty galaxy spitballs in their face if it means keeping him on their side. So people like Sengoku, Tsuru, Kobe, Smoker, and Kuzan respecting Garp makes a ton of sense. He's the kind of person they all kind of want to be. Or maybe except my man Kuzan, because he seems to actually stand on business and draw a line in the sand with the Marines after Marineford and his clash with the Kainu. But he was trained by Garp as well. He is a certified Garp stan, and that's saying a lot considering he's now a Titanic captain of the new worst pirate, Davy D. Teach. And obviously, I won't gloss over everything that we've seen from Garp throughout the series. For one, he was trusted to raise Ace, the son of the Pirate King, and never failed him, at least as a kid. He only failed him as an adult when a full-on war was waged over his life, which, complicates things a little bit, given that Ace made his own choices, defying Garp, and the consequence was his death. In some way, to Garp's credit, it was that moment that almost completely ruined Garp's career, and if not for Sengoku actively stopping him by smashing his face into the ground, Garp may very well have left the Marines right then and there after failing his promise to Roger and letting his figurative son die at the hands of the system that he promotes. And I guess, mostly because he would have absolutely slaughtered a Kainu. This, as you probably all know, is why I'm fairly confident that Sword's appearance post-time skip is probably spearheaded, or I guess swords-headed, by Garp in the wake of his prominent failure to save his grandson. We all kind of funnily enough seem to promote this idea that Garp genuinely believes that he can raise the next generation of Marines, kind of fixing a broken system from the inside out, but honestly, the Marines aren't really the problem here. It's the people that they protect, the ones that they endorse, and the Celestial Dragons that cause the big issues in the world. I'm not sure if this makes sense, but I kind of don't care if Kobe, Helmeppo, or Smoker end up in charge of the Marines. The actual problem remains that characters like Summers, Shamrock, Garling, etc. are at the top of the world here. The Holy Knights and the Celestial Dragons need to be dealt with for any of Garp's next generation of Marines to actually matter. So this has kind of let me thinking, what if that's what Garp is actually doing here? Or better yet, what if Garp's got an equal amount of trust in two other figures to help him with this goal, kind of actually redeeming his character a little bit? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what if Garp's real goal in the story is to raise up a generation of Marines that are well respected, trust the right good pirates and will actually create a good world once the other two people take out the celestial dragons, which he kind of can't. So my theory, or I guess more so my hope here, would be that maybe Garp is actually relying on Dragon and Shanks to complete their own personal goals first. Because despite his clear frustrations with his son, Garp might actually need Dragon to defeat the Celestial Dragons so that all of the bases are properly covered. And looking back at the series, a lot of stuff does actually begin to kind of line up with that idea. Something that's always sort of puzzled me is that Shanks and Garp both spend a lot of time in Windmill Village specifically, and yet never did Garp seem to try and detain or even arrest Shanks. Like, I don't know, I never thought about this, but am I going crazy here? That does seem sort of wild, right? Like, Garp despised Roger more than anyone. He actively tried to raise Ace to be a Marine and detested Luffy's dreams of becoming a pirate, dreams that were brought to Luffy by Shanks. So really thinking about it, Shanks is kind of the guy that Garp should have truly taken out. He's a former Raja pirate, became a Yonko of the Sea, is a former Celestial Dragon, and inspired his own grandson to become a filthy pirate. That's like things that Garp hates bingo, basically. Why wouldn't Garp take Shanks out in his own hometown? Well, what if it is because he actually has an idea of what Shanks is trying to pull off here? The most surprising part of God Valley to me was the fact that Dragon actually was the person who saved a young Shanks, and also the idea that apparently Oda is pulling a Toriyama by giving Shanks the full Goku treatment. You're not that subtle, Oda. I see you. I see what you're doing. Shanks just happened to bonk his head as a child and suddenly is not an evil celestial dragon like his brother. Honestly, I don't think that's actually what happened. It really doesn't make sense in terms of One Piece. One Piece is about found family and nurture over nature, right? And I do think it'd be a like sort of weird choice to explain that Shanks is now good because he fell on his head as a kid. It would be funny, but weird, but also funny. But really, the dragon stuff has been super cool in general, but also has made me question why it's a thing to begin with, why Oda decided to write this. Like, Shanks didn't need to be saved by Dragon. This is a very deliberate choice, and I do think that Shanks is being used as not only a catalyst for Dragon to become a revolutionary army leader, but also as a tool for Dragon and Garp's relationship to change in the story too. Dragon risked his own life, almost dying by the way at the hands of Saint Maffy here, to save Shanks and Shamrock. And I would guess that once Garp finds out about what his son has actually done and who his son has saved, eventually this will shape why Garp has the view on Shanks in the modern era that he apparently does. This pirate raised by Roger is nothing like his father, Garling, or his brother Shamrock. Someone that of course Garp would absolutely know and would have interacted with before. Shanks is sort of living proof that good pirates do exist, and he's proved that the rot at the core of the world is not the celestial dragons themselves genetically, but kind of the position they hold and the system they've created for themselves and that they're born and raised in. A system that his own son is now hell-bent on destroying and left the Marines for. The same system that we keep getting reminded Garp apparently truly despises. And so I have the suspicion that Oda is being very clever here with this Dragon and Shanks stuff on God Valley, because I genuinely think that it's being used to set up Garp, Dragon, and Shanks' true plans. Now, what I'm not saying is that these three are secretly plotting together the downfall of the government. Would that be pretty cool? Hell yeah, I'd eat that up for breakfast, but it doesn't really have to go down that way at all, right? Like, Garp could simply see what Shanks and Dragon are doing separately and be kind of betting on their success and prepping for the case that they're successful. That's why he trained up Kobe, Helmeppo, Kuzan, and all the passionate and good-hearted Marines that he has, because he might have wanted to create the ideal version of the Marines that he has, people who could take out the rotten pirates and properly identify who was bad and who was not, kind of having a proper moral compass. That way, once his son and Shanks defeat the Celestial Dragons, hopefully, the Marines would then usher in a new era too, where they can truly serve the people. An era that's then not built on the backbone of hatred and oppression and good and bad factions. Rather than trying to fight a battle that he's not able to win on his own against the Celestial Dragons, Garp could very well be banking on the next generation to handle business later on once the world has already been saved. But if you want to know, it's actually Ace and Luffy that do really make me think that there is so much more going on with Garp when it comes to all this stuff than we all see. As I've mentioned, Garp's been trusted and respected by so many different characters with different objectives. It's really wild. Rocks, Roger, Dragon, and Luffy, prominent members, by the way, of every type of factions in One Piece, think that Garp's a pretty solid guy. Not only was he trusted enough to raise the son of the Pirate King in secret, hiding him from the government, but his son, the world's now most wanted criminal, also seems to have trusted dear old daddy Garp to raise Luffy. And despite seeing his father enable a broken system to remain in power, and despite all of the truly awful things that the world government promotes throughout the story, Dragon still trusted his own father with the life of his son. In my book, that's gotta be worth a lot of credit for Garp being a genuinely solid dude if Dragon trusts him, and I kinda wanna know what gives people this faith in this man. Despite all the contrary evidence that we've gone through so far pointing to Garp genuinely allowing for awful things to happen in the world, why is it that characters across all spectrums, pirates, revolutionaries, and marines, all together trust Garp? Well, to answer that question, I think we really need to break down the complex and kind of odd relationship between Roger and Garp specifically. Because I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the Pirate King and the hero of the Marines clearly have a lot of history together. A lot of deep-seated emotions and a surprising amount of mutual trust. And while maybe on the surface it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense at first, when you really sit with it a little bit, all these types of questions kind of fade away, at least to me. Questions like, why did Garp and Roger team up on God Valley? Why did Roger trust Garp to raise his own kid that he apparently banked the entire future on? How did this all inform Dragon's view of his own father to entrust Luffy to him? And to be completely honest with you, I think that we might have gotten it completely wrong. I don't think that Garp has any real hatred or loathing for Roger. I don't think that he ever even actually hated the man, even in his prime. If that was the case, Garp would have killed him during their battles. As we see now on God Valley, he very clearly was strong enough to do that, and with a heavy punch, I do think that Garp might have actually pulled that off. And I don't really think that that's such a crazy thing to say after seeing how Roger and Rox reacted to Garp arriving on God Valley. Neither Garp nor Roger wanted to kill the other because their rivalry is a battle of concepts, a battle of ideologies, right? Not a battle between two men who absolutely hate each other. Garp's not a dumb guy, right? He knows that there are good people and good pirates. He's really always seemed to be aware of that, but good pirates don't outweigh the bad ones. For every red hair, every straw hat, or Roger pirate, there are just 10 bad pirates out there too. Roger's obsession with freedom and independence created an entire era of unrelenting pirates who ruined the world in a lot of ways. And Garp knew that Roger's ignorance would be a much greater problem than anything else, right? Especially because he was genuinely just straight up a nice and funny guy. So I think that Garp hated what Roger stood for much more than Roger himself. He hated the way that Roger accomplished his goals and the ripple effect of many of his choices and actions. I don't really think that he ever hated the man, and that's why Roger, even on his deathbed, trusted Garp like one of his own. And we saw that exactly in chapter 551 when Garp's final conversation with Roger was actually revealed in the story. Roger knew that Garp was a protector of the innocent. He was certain that Garp would raise Ace, or at least protect Ace, because Ace was not his father and his sins. This innocent child didn't deserve to be hunted down for something that he never did. And I think that's also why Garp respects and allows Shanks to do what he does too. Let's be honest, Shanks handles things in the world way differently than Roger does. He's diligent, he's thoughtful, and he's very deliberate in what he does. By the way, just like his own son, Dragon is as well. Shanks was saved by Dragon the same way that Ace was saved by Garp. And as I said earlier, I do think that that's why Garp would trust Shanks and Dragon to take care of the real business. I mean, sure, he's frustrated and annoyed that Dragon isn't a Marine, but I'd go out on a limb and say that he's probably kind of proud deep down of what Dragon has actually accomplished. The risks that he's willing to take to destroy the scum of the world, the Celestial Dragons, and rather than battle against Shanks and Dragon directly, Garp simply preparing the Marines for the new world that those two are bound to create, a new dawn that, funnily enough, and not planned at all, will be brought actually by his own grandson, Luffy. But what that doesn't answer or explain is what actually happened with Garp on God Valley. Why did Garp and Roger even need to team up? And more specifically, why Dragon somehow can trust his own father after all the rotten things he's been exposed to? Well, I actually think we already know the answer to this question. And it's all thanks to what Sengoku said in chapter 957. Roger and Garp themselves fought side by side on God Valley to defeat the Rocks Pirates, but what does that actually mean? Honestly, the bigger question to me is what could have possibly happened that forced Garp to not only team up with Roger, but also defend the people he despises so much, the Celestial Dragons. And after everything that we've learned about Rocks in the Herald flashback, because Rocks doesn't genuinely seem to be evil, if anything, he's kind of like the nicest guy out of the three. He literally went to this island to save his family, his clan, and then also Shaki if he could probably, and Rocks and Garp seem to have some form of mutual respect, so what tipped the scales here that they would defeat and even kill him? Well, I won't beat around the bush. I think it was Emu. I think that the mastermind of God Valley, the same person who erased it off the map, also made a dastardly appearance on God Valley, like they do on Elbaf, and used the shadowy evil Domi reversey magic to turn Rocks D. Zebek into Rocks D. literal demon. And if you want to see exactly why I think this is the case, and what caused Garp to go against his morals, and how this all even would probably play out if it happens in the story, you can check out this video right here. You can let me know if I'm wrong or right once it happens in the story, and otherwise, thanks for watching, thanks to all of our fantastic Patreons, and I will see you in the next video on Thursday. Until then, have a great week.